Welcome to the Laurent Collective podcast, where we go deeper than just surface talk.
Each week, we'll explore everything from family, business, creativity, culture, and faith.
To make sure not to miss an episode, be sure to subscribe and hop on to Instagram at Laurent Collective to chat with us about this episode.
Summer is here, which hopefully means slower days, some time off, and more family time. With this in mind, we're doing a summer series of shorter podcasts with some quick thoughts to encourage you. We hope these are fun for you to listen to while you enjoy your summer.
So today we're going to just share a little bit about what it's like to live in a city as a family of five. Just for a little backstory, we come from a small town or a smaller city, major city in the U.S. We lived just on the outskirts of it in a suburb, and so we definitely lived in the suburbs.
For sure.
Where, now here moving to London, we live in one of the major cities of the world, and so there's just lots of different things and changes for our family that we've had to step into and understand and learn. And some things we found that we've loved, and some things we've maybe struggled with a little bit and things like that. And so, I think you guys had asked us a few questions on Instagram about that, and what does it look like to live in a city and live in London and that kind of thing. And so we thought we'd just share some things and our thoughts on that topic.
Yeah, and this could possibly be a much larger podcast, but we thought we'd just do some quick things.
Mm-hmm.
And just to give you like a lay of the land, if you will, is how London is laid out as most of the things that you guys probably think of as London, of like Westminster Abbey, Houses of Parliament, Tower Bridge, like any of those kinds of things are in what is called like Zone 1. And so think of like central, we call that Central London. And so there's a lot of like business stuff there and things like that too. And so we live just on the outside ring of that. So it's laid out in zones of like, from there it goes like zone 1, 2, 3, like that kind of thing, if you can, and then it just keeps going further out. A lot of cities are laid out by that. Everyone calls them different, like in Paris, it's like quarters, and there's, I can't remember what is in New York, like neighborhoods and boroughs, districts and boroughs. And so every city kind of has that thing. So we're not far from all that stuff either. Like, we can get to most of that stuff fairly quickly. I mean, it takes a little bit longer with public transport and stuff. But that gives you a feel for like, we're in the city. Like, we're not
pretty much close
in a suburb,
to the heart of everything.
Mm-hmm, exactly. So, I mean, that took going from living in the suburbs, we actually didn't live in a large house in the suburbs. Like our house compared to some people, it would probably be large.
It was perfect for us.
It was perfect for us, but we moved into a smaller home. Housing is obviously, when you live in a major city, it's expensive.
Very expensive.
I have no other words than that for what it is and everything. But your lifestyle is just different.
Mm-hmm.
One of the first things I think of is like, we walk everywhere.
Yep.
We do not have a car here currently.
Don't own a car.
We walk everywhere, or we take public transport like a bus or a tube or a train. Mm-hmm. We rarely take like Ubers or cabs and stuff occasionally, but we rarely do that.
Yeah, that's more of like a special occasion
emergency or something like that.
But for the most part, you can get anywhere by bus, train, or tube.
So that was probably one of the biggest adjustments when we moved here. I mean, we even had to get used to walking that much.
Yeah.
Obviously, the kids had to get used to walking that much. And so we call it, like, a lot of people refer to it as like your city legs, is you just get used to like, on an average day, I think like when we look at our little health tracker on our phones, on an average day, this is without any additional exercise and stuff like that, we normally walk at least 2 miles. I think my typical average is 3.
I think mine's closer to 4.
Yours sometimes, because you go a little bit further to some different things or back and forth. So 3 to 4. But then if we're out in the city and we're doing some of the kids, it can get up as high to like 9 to 10.
Yeah.
So
on a day.
On a certain day if we're doing certain things. And so Our kids now, when we do get in that range of 9 to 10, that is when we start to say, "Oh,
Everybody's
I'm tired."
feeling that.
And
for
when I
sure.
say that too, we're not like walking straight 10 miles the whole time. Like we're stopping, we're in a museum, we're stopping for lunch or something like that, for a picnic or something. So that's broken up. But we have had several instances where we have done it. The kids are like, "I'm so tired," and we're like, "Oh my gosh, we haven't been doing that much." And then we look and we're like, "Oh,
Oh yeah, we did.
we did walk you 9 miles today."
We did a lot today.
So that does happen. But I love it. I mean, there are times I did get poured on. Absolutely was chucking it down yesterday, and I got poured on twice. I did have an umbrella, thankfully, but from like knees down, I was completely, absolutely soaked. So those are not fun times to walk.
I mean, I feel like I remember in the States, like if it rained and like you got wet, it was like the biggest ordeal. But here it's like, oh, well, I'm soaked on my walk home. Like it just is what it is. And people like just deal with it. Like,
yes, exactly.
So
Like, I mean, yesterday when it started pouring out, I needed to get to a meeting, so I kept walking. But a lot of people on our major like high street, they were just like hiding underneath awnings of shops and stuff like that to wait for it to clear.
yeah.
It usually pours down rain when we're walking home from school with the kids.
Yep.
Never fails.
It's always pick up or
sunshine, and suddenly
anytime
a
you
cloud
have
comes.
to go do something for school, you can guarantee it's probably a chance of rain.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, yeah, exactly. So walking is a big thing. And we do love it. It's sure, when it's cold, it's not the best and favorite thing.
But again, that's one of the things here too as well. Like temperature wise, here in London, it doesn't get really that cold
compared to where we lived.
From what we were used to, it does not get that cold.
Exactly.
So being outside walking around with your winter coat on is not a big deal, and you get used to it. So
You
just,
do.
is
You
what
complain still when it's
Yeah.
cold, though. So that's one big thing. I think the other thing for us, when you live in a major city, you have access to more stuff than you obviously would when you live in the suburbs. There's everything from like more food options to more museums to art, all of that
Just
stuff.
like different cultural things.
Exactly.
Like, it's just,
And yes, there are things, the one amazing thing about London, and you can know when you can visit again, and it's easier to get here, is that most of the museums, the large part of their collection is free to get into.
Yeah.
And so that is huge.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Even like New York and stuff like that, you don't find that. Like it costs to get into all those places. So like the major museums are free to get into. And that makes it so family friendly, I think. Visitor friendly, of being able to go into things like that. And so that is, you often will see us like going to museums with the kids and stuff, and it's just an easy win. Like it's an easy thing. And it also makes you feel like, you feel a lot of pressure if you pay to go into something and you don't see everything.
Yeah.
We do not feel that pressure with the kids. There are certain things that they are like, hey, can we just go to this museum today to see this?
Yeah.
And we just go for that.
It's such a fun opportunity for us to just go, okay, we're just going to go in there for an hour and like just do something different for a little bit today.
Yeah.
And see that thing that maybe Jude was like, oh, can we go back and look at that? I didn't really get to see that last time or whatever. Like we can just
back.
pop in there for just a short time just to see that because it is free and it's not a big deal.
The other benefit too is we are people who like the theater and musicals and stuff like that. And it's hard when you
live performances.
Live performances, yeah.
Like
and our kids like it too and enjoy it. And it's hard when you're visiting a city and like trying to line up scene. I remember this, like when we go into New York City and wanted to see a Broadway show or that kind of thing. It can get expensive because you're like there during that time. You want to see it during that time. You have limited like options. But when you live here, we're part of something that is like it's a free membership, but it's a membership thing that basically they need to fill theaters when the theaters are low. And so we'll get an email sometimes and we can buy, I mean, when I say cheap, like they are cheap tickets because they need to fill a theater for sometimes even opening night or opening week. The thing is it's usually a quick turnaround though. It's like in the next 2 weeks or that weekend, sometimes even that night. And we have gone to see some amazing shows and have spent so little money from doing that and stuff like that. And so that's also like something that's really cool about living in London is like you have that flexibility because you do, it's not as much effort to like get into the city and stuff like that to go see something on the West End.
Closer to the action in a sense.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah, exactly. a city life, if you are coming from the suburbs, some of you that have lived in a city for a while, be like, yeah, that's just normal. I mean, from the suburbs that we lived in, at least, like we lived in detached homes. And so, like, hearing our neighbors, they'd have to have a pretty large party and stuff like that for us to hear that.
Yeah.
And now we just hear it. I mean, our neighbors can probably hear us right now.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure they've heard all the things that we've recorded today.
Yes,
sure, yeah.
exactly. So that's just, I think we were really self-conscious about it at first, of like the kid, you were particularly, of like the kids would be quiet.
I mean, it's, you don't want to bother others. Like, you want to be good neighbors and things like that. But at the same time, you have to do life. And
yeah, the kids just need to be kids. I mean, we're not like obnoxious, but
yeah, that's true.
I mean, within reason. But you just hear lots of stuff like that's just typically, what it is, and you get used to it. One of our sons the other day said he remembered being back in the States and like trying to fall asleep, and he was having a really hard time because it was so quiet. And so you get used to it, I guess, is the type of thing. And then a funny thing that both our kids and us have found, after you have lived here for a little while, you just figure certain things out. Like, when you are going out of the tube that like you stay on this part of the stairwell and then the other part is down. I mean, now it's all marked because of COVID, but before it was generally like you go this side, you go that side. Like, there's kind of a flow, there's a way that you do things. But when you're in more of the touristy areas, tourists do not understand that.
Yeah, I mean, that's normal for any city.
No, it's normal for any city, but it is funny then to realize that you've suddenly turned into more of a local than a tourist because you get frustrated then, and like you're
or you
like,
just or
what
you
are they
understand
doing?
the kind of the thing that you're supposed to do.
Yes, exactly. You're like, why are they trying? Do they not realize that there's no way they're going to carry those suitcases up those stairs? Like, they need to go to the lift or things like that, and like. It's just kind of, or sometimes we had it happen the other day that Jude was like, do those people not know what they're doing? And I was like, well, we could always offer to help, honey, instead of just saying, why do they not know what they're doing and why are they going the wrong way? So yeah, that is kind of a funny thing when you suddenly realize you've turned into the local versus the tourist. What are some other things that you two think that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the bigger things too is, especially for us, as parents, we've realized that living in a city has created more of an independence that happens faster for our kids, and just kind of how they do things. So, like, for instance, our 11-year-old son would walk to school by himself, and so there are things like that that typically wouldn't happen where we were in the suburbs in the States. Like, we would definitely be driving him to school, or he would be riding a bus or whatever. And like, and I think for here, he, like, some days to go to school, he had to get on a public bus to go, half hour away to go to this thing that he has to do in the morning before then and then from there, then he'll go to school with his other classmates,
Or take the tube
or whatever. Like, so I think for us, it definitely was an eye opener as far as like,
and teaching him those things.
Teaching him how to do that and being responsible, but also like it almost felt like we were kind of we're not releasing him yet, but like, we're allowing him these certain freedoms a lot sooner than we thought.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's probably talking to friends that grew up in cities in the States.
Yeah, that it's very true for
very
them.
true to be this. So it's not just, that's not like London specific. It's just like where you happen to be stationed as you're growing up in those years. And, like, one of our friends, I think, was like, oh, yeah, we used to go to the completely other side of the city by ourselves at that age and stuff. But, like, when you were in the suburbs, I mean, practically, that just isn't even practical. Like, it's not safe for them to walk on a major highway or something like that, or a major road to get to something because there's not, public transport for them to get places and stuff. So, it definitely was, I probably struggled with it more than you, maybe, that I was like, oh, he's only this old and we're letting him do this, but... And they teach them to be independent here too. They do give them those skills and help them with those skills as well, in school and things like that. That has them feeling confident and teach them how to be safe and stuff like that too. There's a lot of education on that because it still is a city, and it's not. There's been lots of stuff that happens on a regular basis and things like that. And so it's just educating them and things like that on that too. But yeah, that is a big difference of
That
thinking
has
about
been
how
hard.
young.
I mean, it has been hard for us.
Yeah,
To
yeah.
really process that and think about that. So
Well, because sometimes he'll ask us to do something, and in our upbringings that we had, we're like, you're too young to do that. And it's nothing that's like harming him or anything like that. It's more things like that. Although we do have the like drinking age thing that will be weird because they can drink when they're so much younger here. We haven't even crossed that bridge yet, but
that's true.
there's a whole other
Or just
thing
even the culture of drinking here
is different in Europe. Yeah,
It's very different.
that'll be a whole nother thing. But that has nothing to do with living in the city. That's just cultural. But
yeah.
so I think that's definitely. And it's funny when we look each of our kids and what ages they were when we moved here and what they're used to. I mean, they're all used to it now, but especially for Veda because she was 2 when we moved here. She's a city girl through and through. She literally like dances through the streets. Like we just saw In the Heights. Well, I guess not just, but saw it recently. And there is which is it, Vanessa? I think that it's her when she was little, and she's having the vision of her when she was little, and she's like got a rainbow backpack on, and she's like dancing through the crowded streets and stuff like that. It's like, oh my gosh, that's our daughter. Like Veda, she could care less that there's a crowd. She's used to it. She walks through, she dances through, she sings. Like, sometimes people are like, oh, hi, or like, things like that. And she's just so used to, she skips.
This is just her place.
It's her place. She's super comfortable in it. And it's just funny to think like, gosh, like, I think, the difference and everything like that. And it's just her comfort now. She knows exactly what to do when we're on the tube, and she dances on the tube.
Yeah. Just thinking about the boys, even for Zane, like, he grew up running around our house in the grass. Yeah. And playing in his own yard and, doing those things where Veda is growing up, dancing in the streets and the pavement and like, hearing all the noises and seeing all the amazing sights and colors and smells and all that kind of stuff. And it's interesting to see the differences.
And for us and for our family, we get a lot of questions sometimes like, do you like it better or not? Like for Pat and I, before we had kids, we were always drawn more to city life anyways. I'm not sure why we stayed in the suburbs as long as we did.
Because I don't think we really had an experience with living in a city.
We would go and visit and stuff like that.
But it was definitely, I don't know, there was something, it's funny, we talked to our neighbor the other day and we were having a conversation about him, and there's lots of movement of people moving in and out of the city right now because of COVID and what does that look like and all that kind of stuff. And he was just, he's lived here for a really long time. And he was just saying like, I don't think I could ever leave this place. Like there's an energy, there's a feeling that happens here. And he's like, I just don't think I could leave that. And I think that's kind of what we feel.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think when we try to identify and explain to people, because even when we've had some people come and visit, they've been like, oh, this is a cool place to visit. I could never live here. Yeah. And that kind of thing. And, sure, like where we currently live right now, there's a bunch of deliveries that happen in the morning at the end of our street. And it's like fish deliveries for the fish markets and stuff like that. And there are some days you walk by and you're like, ooh, nasty smells and things like that. But when it comes to that, there's those things that we can complain about, but then there's also there's an energy, and I think our kids feel that too. Yeah. They feel that, and they it's so weird to say in a city so large, but there's a community feel too of like people help each other here and things like that. Not that doesn't happen other places, but it just feels different, and so it's something that we celebrate, and that energy is something that our family really thrives in. It doesn't mean it's for everybody. Yeah. But like our family has really found their rhythm in it. Sure, it was an adjustment at first, but it actually didn't take us that long to get into it. Where it just felt like actually our family fits here. And so that may be for you. It may be like living in the country on a farm or something like that, and your family just fits there. And I think that's what's so cool is that, you put yourself in different places and you just have this feeling like, oh, this is where I'm supposed to be. And I think our family has very much had that with London of just like, oh, okay, this makes sense. Yep. Like it's hard to put into words sometimes. Yeah, definitely. But it makes sense. Yeah. So that's just like, we could probably go much more further into that.
Longer. And again, it's more of like, we just wanted to do these quick kind of, podcasts and just kind of scratch the surface on things to kind of pique some interest to see what questions you guys have. So we would love to know more if you have very specific questions about how we do things and all that kind of stuff. We'd love to answer those questions for sure.
Yeah, and I hope we get this maybe makes you think about like, where do you find that energy? Where's your sweet spot, if you will, of places?
Yeah, we'd love to hear that.
To live. I'd love to hear that too, because I love hearing like the complete opposite of us. I think that's so cool. So we'd love to hear that from you too. Let us know. Thanks for joining us on today's episode of the Laurent Collective podcast. If you enjoyed today's podcast, be sure to subscribe and leave a review, which helps others find our podcast. Continue the conversation with us over on Instagram at Laurent Collective.
We look forward to going deeper than just surface talk with you again next week.